Hey everybody, this is Russ from Retro Game Core. We are going to do another unboxing and impressions video. This is the Anbernic RG Cube. Now, this one just arrived maybe a few hours ago, so we're going to mostly focus on like hardware. So how do the buttons feel? How are the ergonomics? There's a lot to unpack about this device, so we're going to get halfway there and then I'll do a full review later on. Now, this thing kind of feels like Frankenstein's monster. It has like a Sega style D-pad, it's got a square aspect ratio, 720 by 720, and then it has like analog triggers and then like ergonomic bumps in the back. So it feels like there's a bunch of components that make a lot of sense in other handhelds, just kind of squished into this one. We're gonna see whether or not the sum of all of its parts actually is enjoyable in the first place. I'm kind of excited about this one because it's got a lot of performance power as well. It has the Unisoc T820, which is Android based, and that's pretty powerful. I can play most PS2 and GameCube games. It's the same chip that we saw in the RG556, which they released, I don't know, a month or two ago at this point, which was a little bit on the high end for them. It was a little bit bigger, had an OLED display, and it cost around $175. I'm expecting that this one will be similarly priced. Anyway, let's just jump into the unboxing and kind of get a feel for it. Now, this is like a fake unboxing because I already went and set it up, but I put it back in the box so you can see what it's like. There are 3 different colors here. So we have beige, white, gray, and purple. This is the gray model right here, which really has like a NES or Famicom kind of look to it. So inside the box, you will get like a screen protector, which is pretty typical for them, and then instruction manual, some wet wipes, and then you have like your USB-A to USB-C charging cable. Very typical Anbernic stuff here. Now, looking at the device itself, this thing is just so weird. First of all, yeah, like I was saying, it's like very kind of like Fisher-Price, like it just kind of looks like a little bit of a toy, but man, it's got like ergonomic bumps on the back here, and it's just very squarish. I can understand why they called it the Cube. It's got active cooling on the back. First impressions with this is like, it's really compact and small. And I like these smaller Anbernic devices. I want something that's like pocketable. This I would not consider to be pocketable. Look at like how protruding these back grips are. And so I did some pocketability tests. I'll show the footage right here. It's not something you can just slip in out of your pocket like it would be with like one of the other devices like a 35XX. For example, here's the RG35XXH, and you can see that they actually have pretty similar size screens. This one's 3.5 inches and 4x3. This one is 4 inches and 720 by 720. But yeah, there's a big difference in terms of size. You can see that this one's got those big grips on it compared to this one, which is just like a lot smaller and thinner. And so it's almost like they could have made it as thin, but they just decided to add these grips to it. And I don't know, they may have figured that out in the design process where they're like, oh, this needs some grips or whatever. Either way, just a really kind of funky setup. It's got the analog stick up top, which I think a lot of people who want like a retro gaming system are not going to like. But it has that Sega style D-pad, which is kind of crazy too. We have glossy face buttons, much like a lot of their other products lately. And these are Switch style analog sticks. And yeah, we've got analog triggers in the back too. So let's go over each of these components and just kind of get a feel for it. We'll start with the plastic, so just the overall quality of the plastic. So it's rather smooth, but has a little bit of texture to it. I think that's good. These grips on the back are a lot more textured, like they're actually bumpy. And so that's kind of neat. They never really do anything like this, but it gives you the ability to grip on it. The interesting thing is that you're going to grip with your middle finger. That's what actually does most of the gripping right here on the back. So it is comfortable. Like I can feel like I can really hold onto this thing pretty well. My pinkies don't really have a place to go, but it's still like a very nice kind of compact feel. So I actually think that this is a very comfortable, like organized setup right here. Like I actually kind of like it. So I think the plastic is good. It's got a good texture to it, and I like these kind of ribbed grips here on the back. Let's talk about the analog sticks. So these are Switch style. I don't have the spec sheet for this device yet, but I assume these are going to be Hall sensor like with the other ones, but it's the same style, like the same kind of grippy texture to them around the caps. It's a red color, which is kind of neat. Like I like the kind of motif here. First time I've seen red sticks from them. But yeah, it's just got that same kind of wobbly look to it. Like when you use these sticks, you're not pivoting around a lot. It's just kind of moving around to the sides. And so it doesn't give you a really nice range of motion compared to something else. For example, here's the Odin 2 Mini. This one also has small sticks, but look at the range of motion that this has. This is the kind of thing I like. I love these little sticks right here. They give me just a much bigger feel. These ones are just kind of like leaning to each side and staying stuck in the center. And so it's not a really great feel. It'll work, like with certain games, I think that you can make it work. Much like when you're playing a Nintendo Switch and you're like, this works, but I wish it was a little bit better. It's going to be similar to that. Now, I think a lot of people are interested in this D-pad. And yeah, they've made a D-pad like this before on the Anbernic RG Arc, which was like a Sega Saturn style. And it's very similar to that. It's got that same kind of pivot to it. It's a little bit on the like hard to press down on side, like it's a little bit stiff, but I think it just takes time to break in. And honestly, if I compared it to like a Sega Genesis controller from my childhood, yeah, that's going to be a lot looser. That thing's got like, 40 years of gameplay on it or whatever. And so, yeah, this is fine. Like, I think it's going to be good. We'll do a little bit of testing with the D-pad itself when we get into some games. But I think it feels good. I like the pivot here. Very retro feeling. It's like kind of mushy, kind of loose. Like, I like all those feelings. And so overall, I like that they went out on a limb with this D-pad. It feels very retro and nice. Now, I think it would have been even better if it had been above the analog stick, but I think that Anbernic has this impression that if they're going to make a high-end Android device, they had to put the analog stick up top. And so that's just kind of the thing they do, for better or for worse. Now, also on the left side, we have a Anbernic button. This will basically open up their software front end, which I never really recommend. I don't think it's very good. And then you have this back/home button. So you press it once, it's a back button. You hold onto it for a moment, it'll be a home button. So I think that's a pretty neat button. But I have found myself just in the hour of testing that I did and with setting this up, I would accidentally press this sometimes and it would put me in that other launcher and I have to back out of it. So that's kind of annoying that it's there in the first place. I kind of wish that it was like here on the side or something. Speaking of which, on the other side, we do have our volume up and down and then our power button right here. This also works as a sleep function, because it's Android. So here on the right side, we have our face buttons first. So these are rubber membrane and they are also glossy. They're kind of tight, like in the fact that they're stiff. But again, these will probably break in over time. I think they feel just fine. They feel very Anbernic, so no problems here. And I like this red color. Like I kind of want to take these out, put them in a different device because that red is so cool looking. Now, same analog stick right here, just that Nintendo Switch style. And then we have our select and start buttons down here. It's not an ideal location for me. I don't like having to reach down for select and start. I always like them up top, but not the end of the world. We also have an LED right here. I haven't really seen this turn on other than when I'm charging. And so I like that. I don't like having an LED like staring me in the face. And so I like that part. Now for the shoulders and triggers, these are pretty neat. So first of all, they are textured. I don't know if this is going to come up on the camera, but you can see that there's a little bit of bumpiness to them, which I think is pretty neat. These trigger buttons are analog, and so that's pretty cool too. They're a little bit on the stiff side, but not as stiff as they were in the 556, which I thought was a little bit too stiff. So they at least made it not quite as bad, at least in terms of just initial feel with me right here. So I like the feel of these analog triggers. I like the fact that they're using analog triggers in the first place, because that's not something that they would normally do. And so I think that's a great fit for this type of system. Especially if you're going to be playing GameCube, because this is capable of doing it. It does kind of feel like a GameCube controller because you have these grips, you've got these triggers, and so it is a little bit reminiscent of that. It's all over the place. It reminds me of a Sega gamepad. It reminds me of a GameCube gamepad. Like, it's just all over the place. I think that's kind of charming. Now, the shoulder buttons up here, these are clicky, so you can hear them. They're pretty darn clicky, but they're easy to press down on. I don't think that's a big deal for me. I think it could be quieter. I think that's something they need to work on, is like dampening that sound. But overall, they're easy to press down on. Now looking at the top, we've got a headphone jack and then a micro SD card slot. I already put my card in here. Mine didn't come with a card, but I bet when they make it up for pre-order, it's going to have the card available for purchase, which will come with a bunch of games. I never really recommend doing that. I think you should get your own card, put your own games on it. It's going to be an easier experience. We also have a USB-C port right here, which can be used for charging. And also the RG556 could do video out. So this chipset is capable of it. So I'm assuming it can do that as well. There were some issues in that you couldn't charge and do video out at the same time with the 556. So we'll have to see how that works with this one as well. I'm not going to do that in this video. We'll leave that for the final review. Now on the back, we have those grips we talked about, and then we have our fan intake and then our fan output right here. So this does come with an active fan. The other one, the 556, I didn't really use it very often. I didn't think it needed the fan, but because this is a little bit smaller and compact, probably going to have less airflow, so you might actually need to use this fan every once in a while. Now on the bottom, all we have are just these two speaker outputs. So that is stereo and it's also down firing. We'll see how the audio actually sounds. And really, that's about it when it comes to the hardware. I definitely want to check out this screen, but I think it's actually a pretty neat device. It feels ergonomic. It's like, I like holding this thing. It feels pretty cool. It's bigger than I would like, but I can see why that trade-off is kind of worth it because it just feels a lot more comfortable. This feels like a device for retro gaming in particular that I could play for hours and hours. And given the fact that we have this square aspect ratio, it's going to look good with 4:3 content, which means PS2 and GameCube games are going to look pretty good on this. You're going to have black borders at the top and bottom, but I don't really mind that. I like having a device that's compact, but also can play my games. I'd rather have it like this than have black bars on the left and right. And so I think this might be a pretty awesome device, even all the way up to GameCube and PS2. Next, I want to do some size comparisons. So here is the RG556. Like I mentioned, OLED display, a little bit larger. I think this is like 5.5 inches altogether. And then obviously a much bigger device, but a lot more comfortable too. It's got these nice big grips. But you can see here, this is kind of like opposite directions, where you've got the nice big comfortable one that'll be good for streaming, other than those analog sticks, which I don't think are really great. And then you have the nice compact one for more retro gaming up through GameCube and PS2. Now on the other side of the spectrum, one of my favorite smaller devices is the RG556H, and here is the size comparison between the two. You can see that, yeah, this one is quite a bit smaller, more pocketable. So if you're still looking for something that's small and pocketable and of course Linux based, then this might be a good alternative right here, and a lot cheaper. This thing is like $60. You can sometimes find it for under $50. Now another great comparison is going to be the Powkiddy RGB30. This one also has a square screen. You can see right here, they're pretty similar in size, but when you look at the actual thickness between the two, that's where things get a little bit different. You can see that the thickness is pretty similar between the two at the base, but then those big grips really make it stand out more. So the RGB30 is something that I think is pocketable. Like I can throw it in my pocket. It doesn't really stick out that much here, and so it doesn't get caught on your pockets and whatnot. This one is going to get caught. It's just how it's going to be. And a lot of this has to do with the grips, but then also these sticks sticking out. It's just not a great combination, at least for pocketability. So if you're looking for that particular thing, this isn't going to be a great fit, but man, it's comfortable and it's very compact, and I really like that combo. Okay, first thing when you turn it on, there's quite a few surprises. Number one are these RGB lights. Look at them. They're a rainbow color and they are cycling around. So this has got full RGB. Now, when it comes to actually looking at the settings, you can see here there's like an ambient light thing, and they have different options. So there's like breathing and chasing and gaming and light. And so you can change these different ones. Here's the rainbow one. I'm assuming this is just going to cycle through solid colors. Yep. We have a breathe one. That usually means it's going to go dim and bright and dim and bright. Chasing, I'm assuming, is going to go in a circle or something, or not do anything. Interesting. And then we have the gaming one. So I'm not sure what these are doing. Maybe they are going to react to the lights on the screen. I know there's like the Odin one that does that. And because they're using the ambient light setting as the name, maybe that's what it is. Again, I don't really have any instructions here. I haven't really seen any videos about this device either. I think they've released some, but I honestly haven't watched them. And so, yeah, this has got a couple of settings to it. I'm going to leave it on the marquee one because I think that's kind of neat. They've also changed out the background here. You can see that it's like flowing here. Instead of that lady that was before, it's now like this rainbow kind of look. I like this combination. I think it looks kind of cool. It's a weird mix, again, between like retro and modern. Like, where are they going with this? I'm not really sure. Either way, they just kind of stumbled upon it, and we'll just go with it for now. I think I'll make better judgments later on once I've used it longer and taken a look at the other colors. But as it stands, yeah, like I've already set this up a little bit. I've installed a bunch of emulators and games. It came with a bunch of preloaded emulators, as always. Some of those are like paid apps. Always annoys me. So I just delete all of those and then I put my own on there and sideload everything else. And so it does have Google Play Store, so you are able to kind of have that full breadth of Android on it. Now let's talk a little bit about screen brightness. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it up all the way. You can see it gets pretty bright. Actually, I use this outdoors a little bit. I've got some footage that'll run right here. And I actually think it looks pretty good. And so I think you'll be able to play this outdoors. Maybe not in direct sunlight, but it does get pretty bright, as you can see here, when it kind of washes out the whole display here on my camera. Now, if we take it all the way down to the dimmest setting, it still looks pretty good, as you can see. And so I think you can play this one at night. You probably want to turn off the ambient lights. But otherwise, yeah, you could game at night with this little guy too. For the most part, I found that about 45% brightness has been just fine for me. And so this is still nice and bright. Everything looks good. Now, when it comes to Android gaming, it's pretty interesting, but some of these games will actually scale to the square screen. Now, I'm assuming the developer didn't think about square devices when they came up with this game, but it still shows like pretty nicely right here. As you can see, it goes all the way to the top, cuts it out nicely. And so this actually looks like a pretty good way to play Horizon Chase. Before we get to the gameplay, let's do a little bit of audio testing. I'm going to do full volume here. Okay, it gets really loud, like way louder than I was expecting and louder than most other devices. I don't think that volume is a thing that's really important for me. I'm never in an environment where I need to turn it up so loud that it can be heard. But if that's important to you, that's going to be a major factor here. Now, in terms of the tone, I thought it was pretty good. A little bit tinny, like it's lacking some bass, but overall, I think it's pretty nice. I'm going to turn it back up. We're only going to do about 75% volume this time. I don't have super high expectations from Anbernic when it comes to audio, but this is probably one of the better ones that I've heard from them. So kind of kudos in that regard. Like it sounds pretty good despite being so small. Maybe it's the grips that are kind of helping to kind of orchestrate that sound a little bit better, but overall, I think the audio quality here is pretty good. Before we get into the gameplay, let's see if I can turn the fan on. Right now it's on auto, but it hasn't turned on at all. So I'm turning it on strong and see how loud it gets. I can barely hear it. Even if I put it up to the mic, you're probably not going to hear it. So this is a very quiet fan. And that's kind of how it was with the 556. And so, yeah, you can probably hear a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal for me. If anything, I just hear the whine of the fan, not the actual movement of the air. So not a very strong fan is probably the first thing I would say. But yeah, I think it's okay. Now let's actually get into gameplay and see what it's like if I can actually play Horizon Chase with a square aspect ratio. Some of the assets are like really tall and smaller looking, like the text is kind of hard to see. But overall, yeah, it looks like it's working. Okay, now that I'm playing this is actually pretty neat. I wasn't really expecting to play Android games on this device at all, given the fact that, it's got a square aspect ratio. I thought I was going to be playing retro games in emulation, but I would play Horizon Chase on this. I don't feel like I'm losing any of the screen by seeing it like horizontally in terms of the fact that I don't have like a wide screen here. I can still see the entire road. I can see what's coming up ahead. This is actually kind of neat. And as expected, games like Stardew Valley are also scaling pretty well. You can see a little bit's getting cut off here. Again, they probably assumed that 4:3 was going to be the most narrow aspect ratio they'd have to contend with, but it still works. And so that's kind of neat as well. Now, I also loaded up the Android port of Balatro here. I made a whole video about how to set this up, and you can play this game. It's pretty squinty, but it's much like playing it on the RGB30. There's a port for that on the Linux side as well. And yeah, you can totally play that here. Thankfully, because it's 720p resolution, you can still play this pretty well. Like you can read the text at least, but it is very small. So if you got bad eyes, you're probably not gonna wanna do this. Okay, I also tried out Emulation Station. I set this up just a little bit. Like I didn't scrape box art, but I at least set up my games and I used this art book theme and it actually scales pretty well. And so if you wanna use a front end like this and be able to turn this into a retro gaming system, yeah, it's totally gonna work. I need to spend more time like actually scraping the box art and whatnot, but overall I think it's playable. The only system I really set up on the retro side is going to be Super Nintendo. So let's actually start this up because this is pretty interesting. Okay, so here we are. I've just paused the game. So I'm running this at a 8:7 aspect ratio. So it's going to be a little bit squarish. And then I'm running it with integer scale overscale on. So that's going to cut off a couple pixels on the left side, but this is actually integer scaled right here. This means that we're getting the full view here of this game with an 8:7 aspect ratio, which a lot of people actually prefer with Super Nintendo. And yeah, it looks great. Look at this, integer scaling. So perfect pixels, and we're also getting some really great gameplay. Now, it's a little bit odd to play with like a Sega-style D-pad with a Nintendo game, but I'm definitely making it work. And so, yeah, I'm actually really enjoying this experience. I don't mind that the D-pad's on the bottom either. I think that because the device is so small, because we have the grip that allows me to kind of shift my hand anyway, like it feels pretty good. So this is going to be great for retro gaming. One of my favorite devices that has this kind of screen is the RGB30, which is this square one right here. And I like this device, but I only really liked it after I adjusted the D-pad, changed out the button membranes. I even changed out the sticks on this thing. So I had to do a bunch of work on this device. Now it's like $80, but still, I did a bunch of work on this device and was able to really improve upon it to the point where I enjoyed playing it. But there are still some things about it that I don't like, that it gets super hot. It's one of the things I don't like about it. The battery, just like the draining and the charging of this has always been a pain. And so there are a lot of shortcomings from having a cheap handheld like this, not just in cheap price, but cheap quality too. This feels like a premium version of it. There are some things I wish were different, like I wish the D-pad was up top, but I can live with it. And it's just like night and day in terms of the feel of the buttons and the D-pad. Like this definitely feels more premium. And so if you're looking for like the ultimate retro handheld, and the idea that you can actually have the square aspect ratio work really well for systems like Super Nintendo, yeah, you can totally do that here, and it feels pretty premium at the same time. I could play this for hours. It feels good. So I guess my major point here is that all the things that you might like about the Palcady RGB30 that I put in all my videos and whatnot, they're almost all going to apply here. The only thing I can think of that's not going to work the same is that Pico 8 does not have a native app support here on Android. And so you're not going to be able to have the wide range of Pico 8 and Explore and all that stuff like you can get otherwise. And that's just unfortunately one of the shortcomings of Android. You can do things like using WinLater to install the actual Windows version, but I don't think this device is going to be capable of actually doing that at a good frame rate. And so that might be something worth investigating, but it's pretty complex just to play Pico 8. Instead, you're probably just going to be limited to the Pico 8 emulators on RetroArch, and those are not the best. Regardless, I think if you want to play things like Super Nintendo and Nintendo TurboGrafx 16, all these are going to look really nice in an 8:7 aspect ratio. And yeah, I think it looks good. Let's try some 4:3 content next. Okay, so here we are with Dreamcast. I'm playing this with the RetroArch core. So this is the Flycast core, and I'm not really paying attention to what I'm doing. I'm just talking. But as you can see, this is a 4:3 game. And so instead of getting the black bars on the left and right, like you normally would do with like a 16:9 device, we're getting them at the top and the bottom. And like I mentioned earlier, I don't mind this. I like having the bars on the top and the bottom because it gives you a more compact feel overall. Now, when you're using a 16:9 screen, it does feel like wasted space because it's on the left and right. And so, I don't know, I prefer to have this letterboxing at the top and bottom as opposed to pillar boxing. So I don't mind playing 4:3 games like this. This is going to be a good fit for games from this era. Dreamcast, Saturn, Genesis, all that stuff's going to be great. Okay, now let's do a contra test. So I have this in 4:3, so the black bars on the top and bottom. So I'm going to press down and then I'm going to wobble left and right. So it wobbles pretty quickly over left and right. I wouldn't say that it fails the test though. I can definitely still crouch without getting a diagonal, but it is a little bit on the side of being kind of accidental. I don't know. I would say it's closer to passing than it is to failing, but it's still just right there on the border. I think it's going to be okay. Now, a Sega D-pad just kind of feels like this. It's a little bit loose and mushy, and so I think it's true to that. And, I bet you that if you tried to use the Saturn D-pad and do the contra test, it wouldn't do very well. And this is kind of true to that as well. So yes, you can definitely make accidental diagonals right here. It's not as bad as other D-pads I've seen, especially even those from Anbernic. But again, this is a D-pad that's supposed to roll, and it is rolling. Speaking of rolling, let's do some Hadouken ability and Shoryuken ability tests. So here's Street Fighter 3 Third Impact. And so here I'm just going to try to do some Hadoukens, and yeah, it's rolling just fine as expected. Feels good. I wouldn't mind playing this game on this device. It feels pretty good. Let's try Shoryukens. A little bit harder on that. I seem to just be doing the fireball. Oh no, now I got it. So yeah, I think it feels pretty good. I'm not the best at Street Fighter, but I still am feeling like when I do land it, it's going correctly. And so yeah, I think it's great. There are definitely going to be people who wish there were 6 buttons on the front because we have this D-pad, but overall, I still think it's going to be pretty good for fighting games. Okay, now one of the great things about a square aspect ratio screen is that vertical shooters are going to be awesome on this. And look at how great this looks. This is a 4-inch screen, and we're just getting a ton of real estate right here. It looks great. The other thing is that you have the analog stick up top, so if you like to play these games with an analog stick, this is going to give you some good motion. It's not the best analog stick in the world. I wish this was like Odin or Retroid sticks, but still, it feels pretty good and very comfortable to have it up top like this. Now, a lot of people want to know about 8-way directions when it comes to a D-pad, and I'm feeling it. I can feel like I can just roll wherever I need to. I'm feeling pretty good about this. I'm not doing good in the game, but I'm trying to talk and play at the same time. So I do think this is a great solution. If you're a fan of vertical shooters, you've got multiple options. You've got the analog stick, you've got the D-pad, you've got the big nice screen. This is going to be a really good setup. Okay, I think people were keen on seeing how 3DS looks on this, and you can see it actually looks pretty good. We've got both screens, top and bottom. Now, the top screen is wider than the bottom screen. It's just how it is on 3DS. Now, when it comes to this game, I don't think you're going to want to actually play it with both screens at once because you don't really need to see a lot here. So you can tap on the button. I've already mapped it to the right analog stick, but I can tap on this and just make it just a single screen. So you can always do that. This, looks the same as basically any other device when you try to play 3DS games. But the whole key thing here is that you can actually play it top and bottom at the same time. It is smaller and, it's obviously going to be a bit of a compromise, but I think it looks pretty good. You can actually make a custom one too. So you could actually shrink this one down and then make this fill up the whole screen. You could do that as well. That might be a better solution actually. So those are the kind of things that you can mess around with. Now the original DS had screens that were the same thickness. I think they were both 4x3. So what you could do in that regard is make this one bigger and then that one smaller on the bottom. There's a couple different things you can do. It really depends on the game and how you want to play it. But this does give you a little bit more freedom to work with because it's square in the fact that you can play them top and bottom, and it's not like the worst thing in the world. Now, for me personally, I'd rather just play on a DS or a 3DS, but you know, if you want to have all your games in one place, this might actually work pretty well. Now, I didn't spend a ton of time getting all this stuff set up. Again, this is just an impressions video. I want to make sure that everything works and how the buttons feel. But I did also set up Nintendo GameCube. So here we are. Again, 4x3 system. So the 4x3 experience is going to be just like how it was with Crazy Taxi in the sense that, yeah, you're going to have the black bars at the top and bottom. But man, it looks pretty nice. You know, like I really enjoy this kind of gameplay right here. I understand why some people might say this is like a waste of screen real estate or whatever, but I think this is better than trying it 16:9. And so I am actually pretty happy with this for GameCube and PS2 in particular. If you're wondering about what the performance is going to look like, I have done, you know, pretty extensive testing on the 556, and I'll do more obviously for the final review of this device as well. But I do think that's probably one of the charms of this device is that it's going to be pretty capable of PS2 and GameCube more so than PS2, and it's just really compact feeling. And like I mentioned, it kind of feels like a GameCube controller in the fact that we have like these big grips. And so it kind of reminds me of this whole setup right here with this original controller. I don't mind this. I think it's actually pretty cool. And so I don't know. When I first heard about this device, I wasn't like too hot on it because I was like, why did you make it so powerful when it's going to be playing 4x3 content? But I just didn't really think about like GameCube in particular because this actually is a really great fit. And so I don't know. I'm pretty excited about this, being able to play, you know, Dreamcast games, Sega Saturn games on a display that really kind of shines with 4x3 content. Is going to be great. Of course, playing Game Boy, you know, other systems like that, Super Nintendo and 8:7 aspect ratio, all that's going to naturally look very good as well. And those probably aren't the best way to play this system in the first place, but being able to play those high-powered stuff on this device kind of makes it a little bit worth it for me. So I'm going to stop myself there in terms of just the impressions and whatnot. I can always just keep testing, but I got some videos to edit, so we need to do that next. Now, the way I see it, let's just kind of wrap things up. And the way I see it is that this is kind of a sum of its own parts. It is a bit of a Frankenstein's monster. It is a bit of a mess when you just kind of look at it from a design standpoint. Why does it have like rainbow lights around something that's supposed to be retro? Like there's some conflicts here, but it also is very charming. Like I'm really enjoying this thing. The thing about Anbernic is that anytime I see their devices, I'm like, what are they doing? Like, why do they make that one decision, whatever it happens to be? With all their devices, there's always something. This one's got those same things, but they're getting better at that craft. Like, there are so many things that are right with this device as opposed to the things that I don't like. Let's take a look at just the volume buttons and the power button one more time. This is a good example. You would think, okay, they've got volume buttons on the side. You're going to press these accidentally because why would you put them there? And I assume it's because they, you know, needed space for like the fan and whatnot. But the thing is, they recessed them perfectly. So you're never going to press the power button on accident. You're never going to press the volume buttons on accident. They are like perfectly formed. And that's what Anbernic does really well, is that they do put some thought into things. Once they make their terrible decisions, they make them as good as they could possibly be. If they could make better sticks on their devices and have them more of the Retroid style, this would elevate it even more, but they got a lot of things right with this. I'm not ready to make any judgments about it. I need to know the pricing of it, obviously, and I want to do just more testing, setting it up, getting it perfectly tuned for just my overall gameplay. Now, I think probably the best thing I can say about it is that when I was preparing for the trip that I'm about to go on, I was thinking that I would bring like at least the Odin 2 Mini if it came in the mail. And then I was going to bring the RG35XX SP. This is the clamshell handheld that just came out like a few weeks ago. And everybody loves this thing. I love this thing. I've got a couple of videos actually coming out while I'm on vacation that are going to refer to this, including a startup guide and then also a mod on how to fix the buttons. So those videos are all going to come out while I'm gone. Either way, I've been working on this thing for a while. I'm really enjoying it. I've been testing every custom firmware. I've got it all set up, all my games on it, all my retro achievements queued up. Everything's ready to take on a trip. and I'm not taking this. I'm taking the Cube instead, partly because I need to test it, but because this thing is really exciting for me. I'm actually really enjoying it. I hate the fact that Anbernic made another good device. Like, I want to actually like not like one of their devices one of these days, but they did a very good job here. And so I want to give credit where credit is due. This thing I thought was going to be a big flop, but now that I have it in my hands, I'm excited. I can't wait to take this thing on a trip. I'm going to play a ton of Super Nintendo games. I'm going to get some GameCube going on this. This is going to be a good time. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments down below. This is not a very typical video for me. I like to do like those long form where I think about every little thing and have like a little bit faster cuts. So doing these videos off the cuff like this is still something that I'm working on. And I didn't ever plan on doing 2 in a row like this. This is really odd for me. But I had 2 devices arrive at the same time within hours of each other, and I'm about to get on a plane, so this is a lot faster of a setup. And I thought, you're probably going to enjoy getting a video as opposed to waiting 10 days for me to get back and then making something more curated. So I'm not changing like my videos altogether. It just happens to be that these 2 are a little bit different, but I hope you enjoy them either way. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about this device. I was skeptical too, but I think that the more people actually use this thing, this is gonna actually start to shine. It's crazy. Anbernic has been on a winning streak lately. Not something that I would really expect from that company. I remember that most of the time I had more frustration than anything when I tried out one of their new devices, but it's been like 3 or 4 in a row where I'm like, okay, they're finally getting it. So I'm excited about this one. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. As always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful. We'll see you next time. Happy gaming.